I am delighted to welcome our guests here today, and without further ado, I would ask if Mr. Kelly would like to begin with his opening statement.
Eoghan and members, thank you very much for the invitation. In 2019, tourism accounted for 260,000 jobs. In some counties, this was as many as 1 in 5 jobs. In 2020, the sector revenue has declined by a massive €6 billion, and hundreds of thousands of these jobs have been lost. While revenue has stopped, business costs did not, and the stress on business owners is now immense. Fáilte Ireland's response has been comprehensive. Our COVID advisory group of industry, agency and department officials has met 26 times. We have refunded €3 million to businesses in fees and delivered 14 separate suites of online support tools which have been accessed 500,000 times by industry. We developed and continuously update 11 sets of sectoral safety guidelines which have been accessed over 90,000 times. On business tourism, Fáilte Ireland, working with industry, continue to win future business. This year we've generated 200 new conference leads worth €120 million, and our total future leads pipeline is now worth over €1 billion. We delivered 12 virtual sales platforms with over 2,000 global business tourism buyers. On the leisure tourism side, 1,100 Irish industry have now engaged with international buyers on 17 virtual sales platforms organised in Ireland by Fáilte Ireland and on Tourism Ireland's overseas platforms. We launched a major new summer marketing campaign, and Make a Break for It. We also launched a COVID safety charter designed to deliver and instil confidence in safety in tourism. So far, 5,000 businesses have registered. This week we are launching campaigns to promote safe indoor dining and to promote accommodation gift vouchers. We've also established 23 local recovery task forces nationwide. In addition to our own programme, we have provided extensive analysis and input to our department, the Tourism Recovery Task Force and wider government to inform the July stimulus, Budget 2021 and ongoing supports. We are administering 4 new grant schemes for COVID adaptation, B&B restart, coach tourism and inbound agents. Combined through these 4 schemes, we hope to distribute €54 million to more than 12,000 businesses. Budget 2021 allocated a further €55 million for business survival, and we are currently developing this scheme. Extensive research informs all of this. Since March, we have completed 27 research projects, getting insights from 3,000 businesses and 32,000 individuals. I want to acknowledge the work of all in Fáilte Ireland and our department on behalf of tourism. In addition to this, the Fáilte staff have also contributed to the wider national effort, from helping speedy processing of the PUP applications to working with the HSE on Keep Your Distance and Hold Firm campaigns. Looking to the future, while the industry is very grateful for the very significant government support, the severity and longevity of restrictions mean that for many, the current supports will not be enough. Insolvencies have started and will accelerate after Christmas unless something significant changes. Tourism will recover, and the speed of Ireland's recovery will be primarily determined by how many tourism businesses have survived. We cannot rebuild employment without employers, so we must not shy away from providing the business supports required. To do so would be to abandon regional development and self-sustaining rural communities. Cormagat.
And we will move on now to Niall.
Good afternoon, Oireachtas deputies and senators. Thanks for the opportunity to address you today. My name is Niall Gibbons. I'm the Chief Executive of Tourism Ireland. As members will know, Tourism Ireland is the organisation responsible for marketing the island of Ireland overseas. It was established as one of 6 areas of cooperation under the Good Friday Agreement. Before I talk to you about the devastating impact of COVID-19 on the tourism sector, I'd like to give you some context about overseas tourism prior to the spread of COVID. Overseas tourism has recorded 9 consecutive years of record growth, and in 2019 we welcomed almost 11.3 million visitors who spent €5.9 billion across the whole island, north, south, east and west. With our unique all-island remit, we've seen a renaissance in overseas tourism to Northern Ireland over the same period, with 2.2 million overseas visitors last year, generating almost £600 million in revenue for the economy there. In a normal year, we would deliver world-class marketing programmes in over 21 markets around the globe with an audience reach of about 600 million. Our extensive and targeted programme of activity includes advertising, social media and digital marketing, overseas publicity, as well as cooperative promotions with air and sea carriers and other travel partners. Since March, because of the restrictions on international travel, unfortunately most of our paid-for promotional activity has been cancelled or postponed. However, the Tourism Ireland teams around the globe have been engaged in an extensive programme of activity through 2020 to keep the island of Ireland front of mind with prospective future holidaymakers until such time as they can visit again. We've been running an online campaign using the hashtag Fill Your Heart with Ireland, and because people aren't travelling this year, the aim of the initiative is to bring the best of Ireland to their screens. It's about the sharing of inspirational content that speaks to the world at this difficult time and connects people with the island of Ireland. This campaign has achieved excellent engagement with our fans and followers in social media. It's delivered almost 300 million impressions on our Facebook channels with 30 million views and 5.7 million engagements. There's been 170,000 engagements on Twitter, as well as 5.6 million engagements and 5.5 million likes on our Instagram channels. A key element of Tourism Ireland's promotional activity is to showcase Ireland's unique culture and artistic experience around the world. Examples of this from our Fill Your Heart with Ireland campaign have included our collaboration with Philip King and his Other Voices Courage series, as well as our work with Hot Press magazine on highlighting a musical celebration of Van Morrison's 75th birthday, Ray Vaughan Van Morrison. During 2020, Tourism Ireland has been carrying out an extensive programme of COVID-19 research in our major markets. The research has supplied learning into developing consumer behaviour and attitudes that these are fundamentally shaping our activity programme. Tourism Ireland has been represented on the Tourism Recovery Task Forces in Ireland and Northern Ireland, as well as on the Aviation Recovery Task Force here in Ireland. Recommendations from the task forces will be an integral part to our restart activity. Looking to the future, well, this has been a catastrophic year for tourism, but I do believe that tourism can and will recover from the pandemic. Recent news about vaccine programmes is positive and gives us hope. In our research, Ireland has consistently been shown as one of the destinations that holidaymakers will be most comfortable visiting, even while social distancing measures are in place. We have a three-phase plan to restart, rebuild and ultimately redesign demand. Our success in supporting the recovery of overseas tourism and driving business development is dependent on many factors. However, there are three key areas of action. Consumer motivation, to help us identify when consumers will be ready to consider holidaying again and in which markets offers the best term or prospects. Our research shows that summer 21 is the most commonly seen as the next holiday window. Younger holidaymakers, as well as those who have visited before or have family and friends here, are most comfortable about travelling to Ireland, and closer to home markets are likely to present best short-term prospects. However, it's fair to say that consumer sentiment has deteriorated in our more recent surveys. In terms of access, the airline industry has been hit particularly hard by this crisis, and Ireland has now found itself in a competitive situation for air routes with no guarantees about which routes will return. Support will be required to build demand and increase the viability of new and existing routes. On industry and trade, the overseas travel trade have been long loyal supporters of Ireland. However, we're now facing higher levels of competition than ever before from destinations across the world. The excellent relationships which Tourism Ireland enjoys with the overseas travel trade are vital to our long-term success. We will need to invest to create the demand which will support the product on the ground. While remaining flexible and adapting to conditions, we've developed a clear work plan, and that will include the launch of a significant kickstart campaign as soon as the time is right, the development of a new consumer campaign to address evolving consumer motivations, with stage one of the new campaign ready for our kickstart activity, and extensive social media and publicity activity as appropriate to keep the island of Ireland in the minds of prospective visitors. A significant redesign of our international website, Ireland.com, and our digital marketing capability has been underway throughout 2020. The new site is currently going live with weekly market releases happening since the end of November. These will conclude in the middle of this month. Our new Ireland.com will be fundamental to our proposed kickstart success. The pace of recovery is unknown. However, based on the best information to hand, Tourism Ireland currently predicts that the recovery could take in excess of 5 years. In order to improve on this position, an effective, sustained and large-scale marketing approach will be required. This should begin as soon as the health situation allows. As international travel begins to restart, it's clear that keeping Ireland front and centre in consumers' minds will be critical. Every destination across the globe has experienced the impact of COVID and will be seeking their share of recovery, and this increases the competition in the marketplace. When the time is right, Tourism Ireland needs to punch through the noise and create an immediate desire to visit, and to achieve this, a significant marketing investment will be required to enable large-scale, reframed consumer communications in markets with the greatest opportunity. Tourism Ireland is committed to working with our colleagues here in Fáilte Ireland, Tourism Northern Ireland, the tourism industry and all stakeholders to support the recovery. We have a shared ambition for a sustainable recovery. Once this crisis is past and open again to overseas visitors, we in Tourism Ireland will be ready to play our part in delivering that sustainable recovery for the long-term future of our industry. And speaking of sustainability, I was delighted that the Lonely Planet recently named the Burren Eco-Tourism Network a Best Community Tourism Project in its Best in Travel list for 2021, placing it in the top 30 in the globe. I'm also in regular contact with my counterparts in our other Ireland agencies, including Enterprise Ireland, the IDA, Bord Bia and Invest Northern Ireland, as well as the Department of Foreign Affairs, to see how we can promote the island of Ireland overseas with a Team Ireland approach in 2021 and beyond. Thank you very much for our hearing today. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Niall. And I'm also cognizant of Jenny, who is with us remotely. Jenny, before we begin with our members, would you like to say a few words? Okay, you're on mute, Jenny, so we can't hear you. Still can't hear you. We see a lovely background and we see you about to talk, but is it our end or?
You can't get broadband.
Okay, well, Jenny, look, hopefully we will be able to bring you in and we'll begin with our members' questions and answer session. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure I've had a look at the rota, so you know when you're in. You have 5 minutes, and we'll be very strict on that as much as we possibly can to make sure everybody gets in. So we'll begin with Deputy Christopher O'Sullivan.
Will there be an opportunity for a second round, Chair, because there's a lot to get through, and 5 minutes is...
It all depends on members. We give
Okay.
them 5 minutes anyway and see how it goes.
I suppose at the outset, if you don't have an opportunity to come back on all the questions I have, I'm grateful if you could give me something in writing. Would be fantastic. But first of all, just to say thank you for coming here today, and thank you for all the tremendous work that you're doing in promoting Ireland and strategising tourism in Ireland. And I just want to talk, one of those successes I would have to say, Paul, would be the Make a Break for It campaign, which was a huge success. And it kind of touches on my first question, because what we saw during July, August, September was this absolutely wonderful phenomenon where people were starting to discover parts of Ireland that they'd never seen for the first time. You know, Instagram, for example, was a particular platform that was an absolute lit up with images of Ireland that we'd never seen before, because people were discovering Ireland for the first time, and I think that was tremendous, and they really realised what they had on their doorstep. So leading on from that, I'm just wondering, have we learned lessons from that in terms of future strategy? Obviously, now, like we still have to work on that international market and getting people in internationally, but there's a worrying ratio in the past where you know, the amount of money spent in Ireland from overseas visitors compared to domestic visitors was quite skewed. And I'm wondering, is there an opportunity now to address that and build on the success of the Make a Break for It campaign, and build on the wonderful experiences that people had during July, August, September? So that'd be my first question. I'd love to hear if there's a strategy there. Just in relation to again, it's a Fáilte Ireland strategy. The success of the Wild Atlantic Way has been amazing, and I can attest for that firsthand, being from West Cork, and huge credit is due. Just one question for Paul would be in relation to this breaking up of the Wild Atlantic Way into regions. For example, there's this effort to break West Cork, where I'm from, and rename it and kind of remarket it as the Haven Coast. I just want to kind of warn against that, because West Cork in itself it's a unique brand. It's got a unique culture, unique food. The scenery, as you can see there behind Jenny, the old head of Kinsale, is phenomenal. I think there's already a brand there, and I'd be worried about reinventing the wheel. So I just kind of ask if we could stay away from that type of rebranding and stick with what's already there. West Cork is a brand in itself. And again, going back to the backdrop behind you there, Jenny, that's the old head of Kinsale, and I can attest that just about 4 or 5 miles off the old head of Kinsale right now, you have the most incredible megafauna, marine wildlife to be seen anywhere in the world. And, you know, I suppose declare an interest here, formerly a whale watching guide from Cork McSherry, which is only about 7 miles away from where Jenny is. But the marine wildlife off the coast of West Cork is absolutely phenomenal. You're talking about fin whales, the second biggest whale that has ever lived, humpback whales, common dolphins, minke whales, basking sharks. It is unbelievable. And what you saw actually during July and August, September, people's realising for the first time that they had this under their doorstep. And the criticism I would have, and look, it's something I'd just like you to take on board, is that I'm not sure Fáilte Ireland or Tourism Ireland recognise that. I'm not seeing it in a big way. I think there should be a much bigger push, because genuinely the whale watching in Ireland is among the best in the planet in terms of the amount of species you can see. It's a bit nippy, a bit cold, dress up, and you have an absolutely amazing experience. So that's something that I'd like to see addressed in future strategies. I'm going to make one more last point, and hopefully there will be a second round, but that's just in relation to the CRSS scheme. This is something that you can't answer directly, but I'd love to know if you've had feedback from members. We're getting a lot of contact and a lot of phone calls from hotels in particular and other businesses under level 3 who have had the CRSS scheme withdrawn. I think this is a backward move. My understanding of the legislation is that where there are restrictions to access of a business, that they should be able to avail of the CRSS scheme. That is the case when you still have county-wide restrictions in place. If you take, for example, a smaller county like Carlow, they can't rely on business within their county. So that's something I think needs to be reversed and looked at least up until the 18th of December. I've left you with 25 seconds now to comment on that, but hopefully there'll be a second round because there's other questions I have as well, but anything that you can elaborate would be great. I think, Paul, really in relation to kind of strategies and the Haven Coast and West Cork, etc.
I'll be as brief as I can. First of all, to say there is absolutely a very significant programme to follow up on the make or break for it as soon as we're ready to go. We have a whole suite of creative under the name of Keep Discovering, which is kind of the follow up from that. That is, and the research we got back was that 95% of people who took a domestic holiday during the summer were either very or extremely satisfied with that holiday. So we think there is a really significant opportunity to drive up the amount of revenue and employment that comes from domestic tourism. Previously, Irish residents spent abroad roughly about what overseas holidaymakers spend in Ireland. So Irish residents spend about 2 billion holidaying in Ireland and about 5.5 billion holidaying abroad. If we could get even 1 billion of what Irish residents spend holidaying abroad into Ireland, then that would be a huge boon to the tourism economy. And it does spread all around the country, and it does spread across the year. So really valuable, and we've got a very significant programme to try and to follow up on that. On the Wild Atlantic Way and the Haven Coast, there is absolutely no intention whatsoever to divide up the Wild Atlantic Way. The Wild Atlantic Way is the Wild Atlantic Way. The Haven Coast was a way of describing a part of the Wild Atlantic Way. It would never be intended to be a brand of its own or anything like that. And to be honest, we've dialed back from that because it was creating a bit more of confusion. So we're very much focused on the Wild Atlantic Way as the brand. So I don't think there's any need to be concerned around that, and allow the destination brands like West Cork to still be in their own right. We'd be completely aligned with that. Dolphin and whale watching, we did a whole bunch of international research where we put different experiences that people would have, and looked at how appealing they were in terms of their breadth, and also how motivating to travel specifically for. Dolphin and whale watching came out really high, and we're really keen that we dial that up and get. Obviously, there's a thing around kind of the scalability of it, etc., and it's got to be done in a sustainable way. But that's very much on our radar, and it's all along the west coast from Donegal to West Cork. I did, yeah, fantastic
Incredible
stuff, and we'll push it up. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Deputy Alan Dillon.
Thanks very much. I want to welcome our guests here with us today, and again to concur with Deputy O'Sullivan, acknowledge Fáilte Ireland's and Tourism Ireland's teams and our own department officials who work extremely hard to promote Ireland. I suppose the tourism sector makes a vital contribution to the local economy in the constituency that I represent in Mayo. It supports over 5,500 jobs and generates something in the region of 208 million to the local economy in terms of tourism revenue. And I suppose the challenge really for businesses all over the country is to ensure that we can rebuild employment, and we must ensure that employers are supported during this very challenging period. I just want to touch upon, Paul, just on the adaptation grants that were designed for the tourism businesses, for businesses to make improvements so that they could continue trading in level 3, 4 or level 5 restrictions. Just around the justification for excluding cafes and restaurants from the criteria or premises who didn't have an actual alcohol licence, is there any justification for that? For Paul, yeah.
I suppose first of all the adaptation grants were our primary remit is tourism. Now we extended the adaptation grants out to include as much of hospitality as we could, which included pubs and included restaurants. Our issue with cafes is, in terms of the definition of a cafe, because there is coffee stations in Applegreens and Centras and all throughout the country, and petrol stations, etc. And the criteria we had to go off was what was a licensed premises, and that in terms of and that was we're processing thousands and thousands and thousands of applications on that in a short period of time. So that was just the practical issue. Also, really important to note that money we funded was from a diversion of our capital funding, so it could only be used for capital items such as perspex screens, hand sanitizers. It couldn't be used for wearable PPE or other. It wasn't a general thing, and that just is simply the rules from finance, because it was capital funding, and therefore there had to be, the amount of money that cafes would have had to invest in capital type items would be very, very small. So therefore the amount we would have been able to give to any cafe would have been tiny.
In relation to restaurants. So
restaurants were included once they had an alcohol licence.
And I think that's where the real issue is, that an awful lot of restaurants probably weren't in a position to have an alcohol licence, had closed during level 5 restrictions, and they found it extremely difficult to support, and be viable if they were actually looking to reopen. And I think that's the real challenge that we had to listen to as public representatives, is that a lot of the restaurants who were sole restaurantarians and not gastro bars, or where a lot of them could afford off the grants, and it was very difficult for us to explain that situation. So I suppose you have to come from the business point of view in terms of them looking at a criteria and trying to meet it.
Yeah, look, I think, to be honest, there was there was a lot of restaurants that haven't engaged very much with Fáilte Ireland before, wouldn't have been on our system, and they wouldn't be used to these type of grant applications, and therefore, wouldn't be used to and that was a lot of the issues. We extended the deadline to allow more businesses to apply, and we've given as much support as possible. But anybody who was a restaurateur with an alcohol licence, whether they were open or not, were able to apply. So, in terms of, as long as they had a commitment to reopen, because obviously we don't want to be putting taxpayers' money into businesses that isn't going to reopen. So as long as they were giving a commitment at some stage to reopen, then they would have been eligible to apply. So, and I think there was, so there shouldn't have been an issue there.
Thanks very much, Deputy Dillon. Okay, Deputy Johnny Myton.
Thanks very much, Paul, Jenny and Niall. And I suppose we start off on the good news, I suppose, that there's a vaccine available now, and it's going to be available in a shorter period than we thought. But obviously, in my own area, Wexford, hoteliers are a very major employer, and I've met both with Billy Kelly, Colin Neville and Anton Tracy, which are one of the three biggest hotels in Wexford. And I'd just like they were very, very concerned about their staff, obviously, and how can we further support the hoteliers, obviously, not compromising public health. Fáilte Ireland said in their opening statement that they established 23 local destinations recovery task forces nationwide, Would it be possible to get more detail on this? For example, where the destinations are, is it for local business to tie in with, and how do they do that? Also, Tourism Ireland is responsible for marketing the island of Ireland. So what impact do you think Brexit will have on your work? And has Tourism Ireland Fáilte Ireland explored engaging with the next generation of content creators who often conduct travel blogs on the likes of the new media like TikTok? I think there's an opportunity there for a new audience that might not even be on Facebook or Instagram anymore. And I'm wondering, is there a potential avenue of marketing has been explored? And what way do you think we can improve the internal travelling or the international travelling, like the traffic light system we're using? How can we improve it? So thank you.
Very much. Both gentlemen to
Yes,
respond.
both whichever.
Okay, we'll begin with Niall. So this time.
Yeah, okay, look, in relation to Brexit, we established a Brexit task force immediately the week after the UK voted to leave the European Union. We've conducted about 5 or 6 waves of research in our key markets of North America, Germany and France and Britain to see what the impacts are in relation to travel to Ireland. The major outstanding issues at the moment are that, as things stand, if the UK was to leave without a deal on the 1st of January, a possible depreciation of sterling, which makes Ireland more expensive. Secondly, there are a number of what in the context of COVID appear like very small issues, but they matter to families travelling. So, for example, what's the situation with regard to the European Health Insurance Card for people who travel from the UK as a third country now? The situation regarding car insurance, pet passports, trivial in the context of COVID, but in the context of summer holidays will impact on capacity to travel. And then the other issue, I suppose, which works out to our advantage is the fact that the common travel area will continue post 1 January. And that's something that Ireland will enjoy as a competitive advantage vis-a-vis British people travelling to the continent from the 1st of January onwards. The other concern, I suppose, we have on the Northern Ireland front is that the research that we've conducted in France and Germany does indicate a level of confusion with consumers who pick up their newspaper and don't know the details of the politics that we have here, and they just wonder, it sounds like an awful lot of hassle to come to Ireland with all that's going on the border. Can I cross it? We're getting those questions from German and French travel operators, and it's a small hassle, but enough for people to say, I'll leave it this year, maybe I'll come back next year when I know things have settled down. So we're really on top of those things. We have our Brexit task force met again last month. It consists of senior members of the UK and Irish travel industry, and we plan to meet again in the first week or 2 of January, when hopefully we'll have a clear answer as to where we go. Just on the other ones very quickly that you've asked, overseas issues, you mentioned travel influencers, TikTok. We have a whole range of things going on in the digital space. Our new Ireland.com suite of websites has just been launched at the moment in 12 different languages, so it's everything from English language places like the US and Britain to France, Germany, Japan, China, etc. We also have a digital marketing project which will include more personalisation in terms of advertising. In relation to social media, we have a new strategy underway that's looking exactly at the things you're talking about, the TikToks and all these new media that can reach a new audience that traditional platforms like Facebook don't. But what I would say, where we stand right now, is that Facebook is still colossal for us. We're the 4th largest agency in the world on Facebook and Twitter. We have 4.5 million friends on it, and they all have an average of 200 friends each. And if we can get everybody to like or share one thing about Ireland, we reach an audience of over 900 million people. So they're still very significant platforms, but things are changing very rapidly in the area. On the traffic light system, we're very pleased to see that it's come in. It's also complicated by the fact that the UK isn't operating the traffic light system. They're operating air corridors. I think if the traffic light system had been in place since last March, we did a bit of analysis to see with COVID infection rates what would have been open, so to speak. I mean, Britain could have been open to us during the summer for a few months, in Germany as well. But markets like the United States is outside the zone completely. It's in the red zone. But I think the traffic light system combined with the comprehensive track and trace system and hopefully vaccine will see us open the doors next summer.
Thank you very much. And briefly as well.
Just to confirm, Deputy Martin, that there is of course a Wexford destination recovery task force, and obviously not all of the tourism businesses will be able to be involved in it, but it is the leadership between ourselves and Tom Enright's team in Wexford County Council. As a Castlebridge man, I was never going to not let there be a Wexford recovery task force. That is absolutely underway. In terms of the support for the hotels, I think one of the other deputies mentioned it already. In terms of there's a number of big issues. The CRSS at level 3. I think is an essential thing for hotels to get sorted. I mean, I could go on for a long time about all of the various challenges that the industry are facing, but we might come back to that in some more questions.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll have to move on if that's okay. Deputy Matthew McGrath.
Well, thank you. Welcome our guests here this evening, Paul and Niall, and indeed Jenny. Look, it's a huge issue, and your figures are very stark and scary about the amount of insolvencies that we're going to face as well. But I want to be positive, I suppose, at the start regarding what we have in Tipperary, our products, and to welcome and to kind of congratulate, I suppose, Pat Slattery and indeed Trina O'Mahony and indeed Marie Phelan in the whole situation regarding the month of Wales and what they have launched recently, a new product. And thank you for your support of that. The tourism development strategy is encompassing 3 or 4 counties and mountain ranges, and we have nice parts of the country to come and see as well as other parts. In Tipperary, we're not only renowned for hurling and horses, we have a lot of scenery as well. The issues around the whole area of Fault Island and been involved in as an advisory to the HSE, or you've been blamed anyway for the publicans and the wet pubs and the dry pubs. Whoever came up with the name of a wet pub? I mean, we don't have to wear Wellingtons going to any pub, thank God. I think it's a horrible acronym, and I'd love to get some clarification, because now there's huge issues around the CRSS schemes. There's huge issues now with people in the last area that got engaged in food, not preparing it, but getting it from official approved providers and made arrangements to have it safely eaten. And now that's been denied to them, because we're going to lose many pubs. Because I'm being told by gastro pubs that they're not going to reopen because they're afraid of the crowd engagement coming from 20, 30 miles away. So there's a completely unlevel playing field, and it's very, very unfair. So I think that needs to be sorted out, because it's just not fair. We also have Knock Me Down Active, which is a small voluntary group, and I said there are other voluntary groups that are working to promote tourism and get their areas fit for it. And I often use the Greenway in the Gravel, but also the new Blue Way. And I know Deputy Griffin, his minister, was down in County Waterford with us, but we have a fabulous Blue Way on the River Shore, and I want to compliment all involved as well. So that's good for our health as well, but we need to market it. But the hotel sector as well need to be supported, because they've huge standing orders. Even though they were closed, they were paying huge standing accounts to a plethora of different providers, and they've been fleeced, and they've accrued huge losses while the doors were closed. So you can't deal with that, but I'd appeal in your role as an advisory to the government. But if you could answer those couple of questions, please, I'd be happy. I'd be. Yeah, please.
Okay.
Whoever's.
Okay.
Go first, if you want. Yeah, first of all, say we're delighted to support the team in Munster Vales, I've cycled up the Carrigan Shore Blue Way myself and know how beautiful it is down there. And in terms of we're think Tipperary has got tremendous potential, and I'm really welcome the new tourism strategy for the area. I've been through it, and I think it's a fabulous, and we support the development of it. So I think there's a bright future for tourism in Tipperary. With regards to the language around wet pubs, I've no idea, to be honest, exactly where that phrase originated from. But obviously, the government, following health advice, was trying to allow pubs that serve food. The distinction between a gastropub and a restaurant is obviously very. I'm not sure these days when I'm in a restaurant or when I'm in a gastropub. It's very hard to draw the line, but wanted to find some mechanism to allow those pubs that serve food to open when restaurants were open. I agree completely with the points on the challenges that business face and the standing costs. One area that just struck me recently to comment on is the area of insurance that I think needs attention, because we have seen, despite the fact that obviously if businesses aren't trading, or if they've got massively less customers and massively less staff as a result, there is significant reduction in the risk profile of a business. But yet we're hearing stories that insurance premiums are only been reduced by 6 or 7% in some cases, and those reductions are applying to next year's premium as opposed to a rebate on this year's premium. So I think that is something that I think not strictly not within the remit of Fáilte Ireland, but I think looking at some of those kind of costs that businesses have had to incur, that frankly there should be more a better support for the industry in that area is certainly something that should be looked at.
Thank you very much. So where am I time-wise? Niall, did you want to say a few words in response to that?
I'd really, I mean,
That's
we
okay.
have met the Golden Day Tourism Development Plan
Jen-
team, and they did a great job. Delighted.
Yeah, just to point out that our senators have to leave to vote, but they'll be back. It's not any disrespect for your presentations here today. I'll move on to Deputy Brendan Griffin.
Yeah, thanks very much. I wasn't due on for a few minutes, but the vote has changed that. Can I first of all welcome both Paul and Niall and Jenny remotely there as well in the second most beautiful county in Ireland. And thank you all for being with us today. And can I just say from the offset, well, it was a huge honour and a pleasure to work with all of you for 3 years, from 2017 until the middle of this year. And I've seen firsthand just how hard you work and all of your teams work as well. And it's more than just a job. You really do have to have a passion, I think, when you're working in agencies like Fáilte Ireland or Tourism Ireland. And that's very clear to see to everyone who has contact with you. And I want to thank you all for the work that you do on behalf of the people of Ireland and the huge effort that goes on behind the scenes as well. And in particular, I suppose I want to pay a tribute to the efforts that have gone on this year since the arrival of COVID. And very often at tourism events, whether they would be overseas or here, we talk about the need for resilience in the face of shock events such as Foot and Mouth or 9/11 or Ash Cloud or SARS. Nobody could have envisaged what 2020 has brought. And I think it's ironic actually that this day last year, Tourism Ireland, I was with Tourism Ireland launching, and Paul, you would have been there as well, launching the 2020 marketing plans. Who could have foreseen where we'd be a year on? But what I would like to say, I suppose, is that it's going to be really, really important as we get into 2021 and particularly into the second, third, fourth quarters, that we would be ready for the recovery and ready to bounce back. And can I ask, and I concur with the statements that have been made in relation to the supports for business. Can I ask that every effort will be made to speed up the processing of applications for business supports? And also as well, I think it's really important that the CRIS scheme would be made available as well. And I'm glad that was already mentioned here today for level 3 for the hospitality sector, because effectively level 3 is very similar to level 5. But can I ask, is there a specific focus for 2021, given that we don't expect to be fully back to normal? Is there a particular focus from both of your teams in relation to the outdoors and in relation to trying to promote the activities that maybe the consumer would be more comfortable with? Is that what your research is showing, that is what the appetite is for when people ultimately do start travelling? And could I ask then as well, beyond that, in terms of assuming that we will have full vaccination rollout during 2021, how long do you think it will be? I mean, does 2022 revert back to 2019 figures? What's your view on that? How long will it take, do you think, in terms of getting back to where we were in 2019?
Thank you, Deputy Griffin. Paul, maybe you'd like to begin.
Thank you very much, Deputy, and thanks for your kind words. It was a great pleasure to work with you for those number of years, and thanks for all of your support during that time. It was your passion, enthusiasm, and energy and insight were really valued. So thank you very much for that. We, with regards to the outdoors, that is absolutely a central part of our strategy, both in terms of development, because I think not just during COVID, but post-COVID, that's going to be really important. And by outdoors, we've got to define that as both urban and rural, and we've got to define that as being both daytime and nighttime. So that we're looking at all of those aspects of it. Just yesterday, we engaged with a whole series of local authorities, including Kerry, on a proposal we'll be announcing in more detail after Christmas around the building of facilities for shared activity users to use in water, to access the water in beach locations and things like that. So there's a number of things that are, and we envisage more. We're working through all of our destination towns, which you launched with us down in Tralee last year as well. There is a whole bunch of improved public realm that will facilitate that improved enjoyment of the outdoors in urban areas in terms of with public seating and signage and general public realm improvements. So absolutely the outdoor, and the research is completely backing that up in terms of what people want, and that is coming through here in Ireland and in all the international stuff we're seeing as well. So it's a big part of what we'll be doing. We will, of course, be processing. We are acutely aware of the cash flow pressures businesses are under, and we are moving as fast as we possibly can on processing of grants. Unfortunately, for the adaptation grant scheme, the applications came through very late. We had to extend the deadline, and then we got a whole tranche, thousands of applicants in the last 2 days, which obviously slows everything down, kind of thing. But we are working through them as fast as we possibly can, and we'll continue to do that because we are acutely aware of the cash flow pressures businesses are under. Niall, do you want to get points?
Thanks, Deputy, and again, thank you for all your support that you gave us in your time as Minister of State. First of all, what are our customers, what are they saying about us? We've conducted thousands of surveys over the last number of months. And I suppose some of the key things that they're saying is that when they get travelling again, and they're really keen to do so, they will travel to destinations that are closer to home. They're very keen to get back to visit their friends and family, and they're likely to go to familiar destinations, which is different than the message we would have been given a year ago when people are looking for braggable destinations and the new and the wonderful. So what does that mean for us? It means that we're well positioned. It means that we're likely to be out much earlier in markets like Great Britain, in mainland Europe and North America than we will be in long-haul markets, which we don't see really coming back till 2022 and beyond. There are other trends out there at the moment. For example, 20% of European travellers don't see themselves taking a break until 2022. There are still a lot of people who are undecided on their destination for next year. Ireland benchmarks very well against the competitive set. Unfortunately, higher COVID rates puts people off. The types of things that people are looking at online are the costs of travelling, but also cancellation policies, which is significant. Travel insurance, will it cover me if I got COVID? So there's still this big cloud of uncertainty that's out there. But certainly the big thing that's coming through as well is that people are still planning and dreaming of a trip. People are really keen to travel. And as I said, bigger focus next year on closer to home markets, and really been ready to get out of the blocks as soon as the time is right.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Deputy Griffin, for your questions. Deputy Melda Munster.
Mr. Kelly, you mentioned insolvencies in the new year. I wonder if you could expand on that. Do you have any predictions around it, or what do you feel we need in the short term over the next few months to stop large-scale failure of businesses in the sector?
Thank you very much, Deputy Munster. We have seen, a small number of insolvencies to date, but we're key accounting hundreds of businesses around the country. We're providing business mentoring and financial support, and through those engagements, plus through our engagements with some of the leading accountancy companies, we are seeing that more and more of those businesses are teetering on the brink and are tracking towards a scenario where in the first half of next year that they will have difficulty returning a set of accounts that can be classified as a viable going concern. And obviously, I think when things like the July stimulus package and the budget, etc., were done, the outlook for tourism and hospitality businesses was probably more positive than we've had with, for example, the level 5 restrictions for the last 6 weeks, etc., and the impact that's had. The fact that inter-county travel can only open for 3 weeks, and it's great that it is going to be open for those 3 weeks across the key time, and I think good for safety as well. But those restrictions are probably tighter than were envisaged at the time, and as a result of that, the levels of supports that are there. I think in terms of, we've spoken about the CRSS. I think One of the other things that's coming through to us is, how banks are approaching businesses now. The moratorium was incredibly helpful. It would be absolutely vital to survival. That ended in October, and it's still relatively early days after that ended. But we're now beginning to hear back how banks are treating tourism and hospitality businesses on a case-by-case basis, and whereas in some instances we are hearing, we're hearing banks being supportive and being flexible. We are hearing some cases of where banks are demanding full capital and interest repayments, in line with a normal sales schedule, as if a business was ongoing, and that is clearly unsustainable when businesses can't trade and can't get any revenue. We don't have enough evidence to kind of call anyone out individually yet, but we are hearing some cases, and we will be monitoring and following up as appropriate when we hear on that. But in terms, I think that support from banks will be essential to keep people out. I think one of the other issues is that the government-supported schemes through the SBCI, etc., the take-up of those and the applicability of those from tourism businesses is tiny. They are not helping the tourism sector to any material. It's a handful of businesses from tourism have been able to access those, and part of that is because the involvement of the banks in those schemes means that they, for various reasons, they're not because the government doesn't want the money to go there, but because of the process and the involvement of banks, the money's not going into tourism business. And for businesses to be able to refinance and restructure their debt, because as Niall was saying, the recovery is not going to come immediately, and there is going to be a period of time before we can build back up to the types of business levels that we thought we were going to have. So finding some mechanism to help that financing restructuring of businesses is also going to be critically important.
Thanks for that, Mr. Kelly. That was very informative. Mr. Gibbons, I just wanted to ask you about your marketing budget for 2020. Did you spend it all, or how much was left over? Can it be carried over to 2021? And you made reference there about you're already paid for promotional activity had been postponed or cancelled. Can you recoup any of that? And do you have a particular bigger scale budget for next year, given what we're coming out of and going into for promotion, etc.?
Sure. So just to clarify, we postponed all our paid-for marketing activity, like advertising on television and what you'd expect, from the first week of March, when it was apparent that that wouldn't be worthwhile, so to speak. We still had investments ongoing to keep everything running. We had a very active programme during the year that our staff were engaged in. We do have unspent funds at the end of the year that we're in talks with the department about in relation to how that can get handled in hopefully supplementing our budget next year. The Tourism Recovery Task Force set up by the government earlier this year, which reported back in the summer, recommended a doubling of the tourism marketing fund for next year, and that's under consideration, I think, in the next number of months when the time is right to do that. There's no question that the budgets that will be there at the moment would be insufficient to do the level of work that's going to be required when things get back to a post-COVID world. So I don't have the exact figure in my head, I'm sorry about that, but we are.
If you don't, you can furnish me with it later maybe, but have you an idea even of the percentage of unspent funds that we could possibly get carried over into next year?
That's what we're actually discussing that with the Department of Tourism and Media at the moment, and the figures there. It's also complicated by the way, that we get about 25% of our funding from Northern Ireland, which comes in sterling, that has a different year end than that, and we've got funding ratios we've got to try and maintain. So I'll come back to you with the figures. I'll be very happy to do that.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Deputy Peter Fitzpatrick.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to welcome Paul Kelly, the Chief Executive of Fáilte Island, and also Jenny D. Salas, and also Niall Gibbons, CEO of Tours Ireland. We all have to agree that 2019 was an absolutely fantastic year for the tourism in Ireland, and like 260,000 jobs was fantastic. And I was just looking there that every 1 million in tours spent supports 27 jobs, and I think also generating money for the revenue of 1.8 million. I come from a wee county in Louth. It's just on the M1 motorway. It connects between Dublin and Belfast, and in Louth we're very lucky. We've the two biggest towns in Ireland, Dundalk and Drogheda, and plenty of more small towns and villages. We do appreciate over the last number of years of the capital investment that you've done with Louth and in the King John's Castle, like one down in Carlingford, and also the money that you invest in festivals like the Flag Cure in Drogheda. We in Louth feel as though we've a lot to offer, and we just hope that the fact that we're in a wee small corner of the country that we're not neglected. Like if you look there, we have the Drogheda Museum in Millmount, we've got St Peter's Church, the Monaster Boys High Cross and Round Tower, the Carlingford Events Centre, the Great Eastern Greenway, which connects with Meath and Carlingford, and the County Museum in Dundalk. These are just a few. But when I was reading your report there, the alarm signs are like in 2020, you're going to lose 6 million. There's going to be thousands of jobs lost, and like especially along the border area. We're just wondering, like, what plans do you have put in place? Like, like every county done really well over the last number of years, and we just, to make money, you have to create money as such. So we're just hoping that the funding's there, and you spoke very well together. I just want to know is, what plans have you got going forward, like the wee county of Louth in tourism backing and also funding? And if you can just elaborate a wee bit more. You mentioned there that you refunded 3 million to the business in fees as such. To me, that seems a wee small amount of money and there. So I just want to know is, what are your plans going forward? And just don't forget the wee county of Louth. Thank you.
Please, Madam Well-Made Deputy Fitzpatrick. Paul, I think the pressure's on you there.
Absolutely. The 3 million in fees was basically just as soon as the kind of COVID impact hit, we immediately went any registration fees that businesses had paid to us, so accommodation needs to register with us, fees that businesses would have paid to us to participate in sales platforms that either we would run or Niall's teams would run, etc. We got that money straight back to businesses. It was a tiny drop in the ocean in the context, as you say, of a 6 billion revenue loss. The 3 million in fees was a tiny drop in the ocean, but it was just important for us to get whatever we could back to businesses. And we've, in terms of from our own funding this year, we repurposed the adaptation grant. We repurposed about 16 million of our own capital, which is what we're able to repurpose at short notice. Plus, the government gave us a further 10 million to add to that for the adaptation grant scheme. The other thing is that we have launched in the last couple of weeks a grant scheme for inbound agents. So these are all the people, if you like, at the top of the funnel that bring people into Ireland that then stay in hotels and eat in restaurants and use buses and taxis and stuff. But if these people, if they go out of business, then we lose the business they have on their books, and we lose the vital relationships they have with international buyers. So any money that we've left over in our budget, we have swept up and put into a fund, and that we've totaled about 10 million that we are now going to be distributing to those inbound agents because they didn't qualify for CRSS. So the only support they've had has been the wage subsidy scheme, which isn't enough to cover any of their costs, their fixed costs. So we've allocated any funding we've had left over into that to help fund those businesses. So basically, any funding we've been able to get from our own resources, we have prioritised giving that to businesses, plus in all of our work and analysis, advocating for more government support to go into the businesses. With regards to Louth, we am delighted to say that we've been working with Louth County Council. Louth is an important part for a wee county. It's a very important part of Ireland's Ancient East offering, and there's some great historical assets. You mentioned John's Castle, etc. And I'm delighted to say that in half two of next year, we're going to complete our Destination Towns project with Louth County Council in Drogheda, and that will be, a further improvement in the and enhance the offering that Drogheda will bring to in terms of its appeal to tourists. So, very much, on our radar, and we're continuing to invest in there. And that's just one example of a project coming up.
Right.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add probably is, Deputy, you left out probably the biggest hook you have for the next number of years, which is the ancestry of the President-elect of the United States. So we've already had a few genealogists on to us having mapped his ancestry, so we can make the most of that when the time comes. But look, we have good connections with Louth, and it's an important part of the future. And look, when we get going next year, it certainly won't be off our map. I assure you that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Deputy Kieran Cannon.
Thank you, and thanks to all of you for not alone your time spent with us here this afternoon, but your significant time spent in working with those involved in tourism and hospitality and shepherding them through what has been an unprecedented time for all. Just a couple of observations, I suppose, no harm being somewhat parochial when one gets the opportunity. The Wild Atlantic Way, I live about 20 minutes from it, and there's some very excellent work happening in the last couple of years in determining how do we drive some of that huge traffic that has been generated by this wonderful concept inland off the Wild Atlantic Way. I suppose, first of all, to make it more sustainable in terms of how it's traversed and the impact it has on towns and villages along the way itself, and then, as I say, driving additional economic activity inland. And one of those propositions is the Burren Loop, which takes in kind of the northern Burren and southern Galway, an area we like to refer to as the Burren Lowlands. I know there's significant work ongoing. It was supposed to be live for this season just gone. Obviously, that was not never going to happen in the context of where we are, but I just hope that it would be live for next season, that all the necessary signage would be in place, because there are a huge number of tourism operators, and obviously you mentioned, Niall, the award for sustainable tourism that was awarded recently to the Burren and to the operators there. They're very ambitious about what this loop can do for some of the smaller towns and villages that are inland off the Wild Atlantic Way. Also, while I'm on the Wild Atlantic Way, through nobody's fault, there was a very excellent project gotten underway to develop a cycling event along the length of the Wild Atlantic Way, which this is a huge undertaking. I think it was broken down into 16 stages, and perhaps that was one of the reasons why it didn't take off as successfully as we had hoped. But I still think there's an incredibly powerful opportunity there to develop perhaps a number of cycling events along the Wild Atlantic Way, marketed internationally. It is one of the most stunning locations in the world in terms of its scenery, in terms of the welcome, in terms of its people and its traditions and its culture. And I'd hope that having had difficulties arising from the first iteration, that we might try again getting something similar underway. The Beara Breffni Way, which is kind of, I suppose, Ireland's potential answer to I can never remember the name of that. That's, yes, Camino, starting in County Cork and winding its way all the way to Cavan, and a significant part of that moving through East Galway along the Hymany Way. I'm just running, there was an initial commitment there of just over €1 million a number of months ago. How has that money been spent? How do we intend to further market this extraordinary opportunity to open up Ireland's hidden heartlands? And I know, as somebody who has a passion for just tourism, exploration, and using my bike to see different parts of the world, I think there's an incredible opportunity here to open up a region, a whole, that middle part running up through the spine of Ireland, what to call it that, along the banks of the Shannon, through places that have yet to experience that kind of economic lift that can arise from tourism, and just wondering what are the plans there for the future. But well done to all of you for the work you're doing. You're doing exceptional work and in very challenging times. And I do think that when we emerge from this, we'll emerge stronger. We'll emerge perhaps more focused on where our real strengths lie in terms of marketing ourselves internationally. And can I just say finally, well done to all of you on your excellent use of social media. Ireland, I think, and both Fáilte Ireland and Tourism Ireland can hold itself up as one of the exemplars, global exemplars in its use of social media. We've really upped our game on this in the last 5 to 10 years, and we're seeing the results of that internationally. So thanks and well done to all of you.
And Paul, would you like to respond?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, just a couple of points. Yes, the Burren Loop, very exciting initiative, and it should be fully open by the time tourism can get back going again. I think it is a fantastic part of the world, and we were delighted to see the work of everyone involved in the ecotourism project get so well recognised, and we think that that this idea of if you like, looped drives off the Wild Atlantic Way is a key thing in terms of helping people have an even better experience, helping to do it, spread the visitors so that it's more sustainable and it's better managed, and as well as sharing the benefit of tourism to a wider proportion of the community. And the Burren Loop is a great example of that, and I think is going to lead to a lot more development and new small businesses, sustainable eco-craft businesses kind of setting up in that part of the world. So I think it'll be 10 years' time before we really see the full benefits of the Burren Loop. The Beara-Breffni Way, we have a master plan for both the Beara-Breffni Way and the Shannon navigation that are in train at the moment. Really important that on the Beara-Breffni Way, it's not just about the walk itself. It's not just about the path. It's about how those paths, when you build those paths and you build those walks, it's how they connect with the businesses and the communities along the way. So how can I get from a town that is maybe 1 kilometre or 2 kilometres from the Beara-Breffni Way onto the Beara-Breffni Way? And how do I get people off the Beara-Breffni Way and into local bed and breakfasts and into local cafes and stuff like that? So it's all of that kind of tourism development that will be part of the master plan for the development of the Beara-Breffni Way. And finally, cycling on the Wild Atlantic Way, absolutely, very disappointed that kind of things went wrong with the first iteration of that, but we are, fully committed, believe massively in the potential of the Wild Atlantic Way for becoming globally famous as a cycling route, or as a number of cycling routes, and we're working with a range of stakeholders on trying to bring that to life.
Can I move on?
Just to add, those products that are being developed will be very important to the marketing in the future, so we're very closely together.
So just to be clear, the Burren Loop will be live by incoming season, next season, that's the plan?
That's my understanding of it, yeah. Let me confirm that in case there's been some hiccup in development or something, and I'll come back to you, but that is my understanding.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Senator Shane Castles.
Thank you, Corry. Look, apologies, and we're probably going to get called again in a second, so look, I'll just pose a couple of very quick questions to thank both witnesses for their presentations, for the work that they do on behalf of the sector, which is appreciated, and obviously the stark figures as outlined in your presentations showed the severity of what we're dealing with from both an economic point of view and a sectoral interest point of view as well. First of all, just talking about the supports. Obviously, Minister Catherine Martin was here at the start of October, and looking forward to that 3 or 4 month period in which various incentives are being put in place, one of which was, of course, the Stay and Spend particular scheme, which I think had a fund of over 200 million. Can I ask, in the context of the number of weeks that was saved as a result of us going into level 5, I would expect there was somewhere in the region, if you were to break it down just on rough figures, you're talking maybe 40 odd million. Is that money going to be reinvested back into the sector in terms of grant aid, or what has been the communication with yourselves and the Minister in terms of what's going to be done with that money?
The Stay and Spend scheme was an initiative by Revenue and Department of Finance that we were working with them on the marketing and promotion of it. As you know, the mechanism was a rebate on the tax mechanism. We were never allocated a pot of money or anything for it in terms of, so there isn't like a pot that can be reallocated.
In terms of you as an industry player, in terms of your then communication with Niall Cody or whoever, in terms of actually seeing either an extension of the time frame or seeking government to the money that would have been allocated through the loss to the Exchequer in terms of revenue on tax, how that could be reinvested.
And in terms of, I think that will be a matter for our department to pick up with Department of Finance in terms of, because I would imagine that the financial projections that were done at the time across the whole economy of the Stay and Spend scheme ended up being quite different than what's come out because of the deteriorating health position. But I think, importantly, obviously the stay and spend scheme, because we moved into level 5 restrictions, the stay and spend scheme wasn't able to be accessed. So certainly I think we'll need to see the principle of a tax rebate for money spent on tourism, considering that 23 cents of every euro that's spent in tourism goes back to the Exchequer. The idea of the Exchequer reinvesting some of that to stimulate the demand, it pays for itself as an initiative. So I think the principle of it is a great initiative.
It's very good. I'm going to move on, but it's just revenue are never going to come chasing to hand money back. So I mean, in terms of the liaison and the communication to make sure that the concept was good, I'm not too sure if it's going to be realised, given the fact that if we come into January and there are going to be further restrictions, we're not going to see that scheme realise what it was supposed to do in terms of the domestic market.
We'll certainly be picking that up with
I think it's key, and in the context of whatever government allocated in the context of what they thought was going to be lost to the Exchequer on one side, that pool of money, or the theoretical pool, ideological pool of money, would actually be driven back in. In terms of the issues on liquidity, and you touched on that as well, Paul Gallagher was here back before level 5 as well. He touched on it briefly with me in the context. He said, like, hotels are not going to disclose that they're having issues in terms of liquidity. But he did talk about the forecast numbers for November. We're talking about an occupancy of 4%, which would be nearly 60,000 empty bedrooms during the month. Have you got figures yet for how November turned out in terms of empty bedroom spaces during that particular month?
No, we don't have that specific data yet, other than to say that because of obviously level 5 restrictions, that the occupancy levels will have been way below what would have been, to cover any of the fixed costs.
He was saying those figures with that in mind. And in terms of your expectations, given the gravity of saying, liquidation issues or liquidity issues are an issue, in terms of January, February, March, what would the expectations of the sector be for that?
I think the expectations of the sector will be relatively low. I mean, at the moment, they've only been told they can open with inter-county travel until the 6th of January. I mean, what's going to happen after the 6th of January? Obviously, what happens on the health front will be massively, a massive determinant of that. But the expectations of the industry, I think, for that is always the worst time of year anyway, that period until kind of the season gets going again post St. Patrick's Day. So that's always the toughest time of year to get through, and in the context of people are now facing into it with nothing left in the reserves, and it's going to be, so I think that the expectation is once again very grim.
And just finally, just on a point that Deputy Dillon raised as when he led off here this afternoon in the context of the supports in terms of cafes and support, and I acknowledge what you said in terms of the bar that was used, in terms of licensing or whatever, but just the general and indeed the collaboration between, say, Tourism Ireland and Fall to Ireland in terms of marketing the food product. Is there good collaboration there? Because obviously Tourism Ireland, used that as a marketing point and have done the analysis in terms of what can differentiate ourselves to bring tourists here. Is there good collaboration there between both bodies in that respect?
Absolutely. I think and I'll talk. So I mean, the last year, about this time last year, we would have just been coming to the end of Taste the Island, which was a 3-month-long food initiative that we had developed to market, to build and market Ireland as the island of Ireland as a quality food destination. It was a joint initiative between Fáilte Ireland, Tourism Northern Ireland, and Tourism Ireland, and that had got off to a great start. It was just being established last year. This year was supposed to be when it was going to be marketed internationally, but obviously, in terms of that made no sense to run this year. But I think that's just one example of how we work together to promote the food offering in Ireland. Niall, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, that was a good initiative. I mean, food will be another passion point in the new campaign which you're going out to shoot in the first quarter of next year, which will be part of the major relaunch. There's a great phrase I heard a number of years ago that we got research from a company called Condé Nast, one of the most prestigious publications in our industry, and that said food is the new currency of tourism. I mean, this is something that actually influences people's choice of destination. And it's not about always going to gourmet restaurants, by the way. It could be going to the farmer's market. It's about the local ingredients. It's about the artisan producers. I think Ireland is very well positioned now with some of the great work that Borbia have done, for example. And we overlap with them in the space too, to bring sort of the taste of Ireland to the world as well. Yeah.
Paul, just very quickly, quickly on the training issue. I mean, there's going to be a huge amount of people having left the industry during this particular, who are not coming back. We've heard the anecdotal evidence in terms of people going to just work in whether it be supermarkets or so forth because they can get a guaranteed contract. What is going to be the situation in terms of Fáilte Ireland's support for people getting back into the industry when it gradually reopens?
Yeah, well, look, we have a division that looks after, you know, kind of careers promotion and
retraining, getting back into the, you know, if it is a case that you have to apply to a new workforce.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if we have sound from Jenny because Jenny looks after this area. Do we have sound from Jenny?
Yeah, I think we do.
Excellent.
Okay, cool.
Perfect.
Jenny, do you want to?
Yeah. Just as Paul was saying there, that's going to be the huge challenge in terms of actually bringing people into the industry. So we've been working, we have a careers oversight group, and we've been working with the third level education bodies as well as the ETBs about creating a range of easy to access training that can bring people into the industry. And also, like, one of the big challenges that we've had in tourism for retention is around the perception that there isn't a career. So there's a big piece of work that we're doing within Fáilte Ireland on continuous development, and that's really for those that are in the industry, that we can upskill them so that they can take the opportunities that will come in the future, and they will be encouraged to stay in the industry because they'll believe that there will be career progression opportunities for them.
Senator Malcolm Byrne.
Look, and thanks to Paul and Niall and to Jenny and indeed to all of your staff and teams for the work that you do. And again, like my colleague, my apologies just when we were called away to votes, and I know a number of the issues that I wanted to ask about have been raised, but if I can put a couple of specific questions. One of the things, you know, is the outcome of Brexit. There's been a lot of emphasis on additional shipping routes, and most of this has been around avoiding the land bridge. But I often think that we haven't focused sufficiently in terms of on ferry traffic, and obviously coming from Wexford in particular interest in terms of enhancing the offering in Rosslare, but with new additional ferry routes being put in place, there are opportunities there, and if there are plans to develop and market those.
Yeah, in relation to ferries, I mean, to put it in perspective, they're a really important source of business. I mean, on the three corridors, in a normal year, so to speak, pre-COVID, there are approximately nearly 50,000 car spaces every single week. People who travel on ferries tend to stay longer and spend more than people who arrive by air, and it's a really important source of business into the regions, both on the northern, central and southern corridors. We have been talking to DFDS in relation to the new ferry that was announced last week, in relation to perhaps putting some supports in place for marketing in relation to that. I know that the Minister for Foreign Affairs is meeting Brittany Ferries as well to talk about Cork, so we're briefing him in relation to that as well. We do a lot of cooperative work with the existing carriers already, so the likes of, and again I'm talking in a pre-COVID environment here, but the likes of Irish Ferries, the likes of Stena and the likes of P&O would engage in joint marketing campaigns with us, mainly in the British market, but also in the French market as well, to stimulate that car traffic. It's an important source of business, and I think the Brexit comment is very relevant at the moment too.
I think one of the other issues just and I think in terms of the issue around the CRSS and the need to extend kind of the wage subsidy scheme, I think we've talked about this extensively already, but I would certainly have specific concerns around some of those not-for-profit tourism ventures. I'm thinking in Wexford in the case of Hookhead, the Dunbrody, the Heritage Park, which haven't been able to avail of the commercial subsidies and supports, and it's going to be essential, and they're all around the country, that they have the supports to kind of survive till next summer when the vaccine rolls out. So I don't know if...
Yeah, I can take that. They are, in addition to the CRSS, the government allocated 55 million in business continuity support in 2021 for 2021 to Fáilte Ireland, and we are currently working through the detail of that scheme and how we might bring that to businesses. And that was very much kind of a sense of that there was probably we didn't have the clarity as to what CRSS was going to cover or not going to cover, but the sense was there was probably going to be gaps in it. One of the issues is around to be eligible for CRSS, you have to be eligible for corporation tax, and those not-for-profits are not eligible for corporation tax. So, whereas we can't confirm any details, we are very aware of those sectors of the tourism economy that don't qualify for CRSS and the not-for-profit attractions like the Dunbrody Famine Ship, Hookhead, etc., would fall into that category. So we're very aware of those. They are really important that those community-type projects get supported because they bring visitors into areas. They are strategic tourism businesses. They bring business in. They drive demand in an area. So, you know, in terms of, we will be certainly doing all we can to help in that regard.
Can I put a specific market, which was also quite hit, is golf tourism, and as you know, the international golf tours, which are hugely important to Ireland. They've been badly hit and haven't been able to avail the same supports. How are we going to revitalise that sector?
Look, it's a key part of the international offer that we have, the whole golf space. I mean, we saw, for example, in Northern Ireland, the success of the Open last year, the amazing publicity that it gets. But I know, just from even personal experience, being up and down the West Coast this year, the absence of golfers was a huge impact in relation to golf clubs and the knock-on thing as well for caddies, all those downstream activities, so to speak. So certainly on the marketing front, I mean, golf will be to the forefront in relation to our promotional campaigns. And it's not just for attracting golfers, by the way, it's actually about the destination and all that goes with it, you know, because it's much higher end. I mean, I don't know if Paul wants to talk about the product side of it.
Yeah, there is an association of the Irish Golf Tours Association, and all of their members should be eligible for the inbound agent survival scheme I spoke about that we're funding with a fund of 10 million. That scheme is open now, and we're working with the golf tour those inbound tour groups now to make sure, because if they don't survive, we lose those relationships and we lose that you know, they're the key people that Niall's team work with in international markets. So we've got to make sure those businesses survive. I know also that there are some golf courses. Not all, but there are some golf courses for whom that international revenue is absolutely the mainstay of their finances, and you know, in terms of they are really struggling at the moment, and I think they will need some form of support. And I think, you know, in terms of we will be having conversations with our colleagues from the sport side as well around kind of because we don't want those trophy courses going out of business either, because they are important, really important.
One final very quick question, Chair, which is around sort of the post-COVID environment, because we've got to think about getting to next summer and beyond that, but it obviously is going to have a huge impact on international travel, on business travel, and you know, where, if you were to now pitch and look at the Irish tourism product in kind of 5 years' time, where do you see it as being in terms of the impact that COVID and Brexit has had and will have? And I know this is a bit crystal ball gazing, but where do you see it?
Now we'll talk from a marketing and positioning point of view. I'll just talk from a product point of view. First of all, it's important to say there is a huge amount of development going on at the moment in terms of we've got about 50 to 55 large capital grant projects in train all around the country. I think the number is about 15 of those between 2020 and 2021. There's about 15 of those that were due to complete and open. And the work is all continuing on those. One or two of them are delayed because of COVID, but in the main, they're all continuing. And when we reopen, in addition to that, we've got destination towns all around the country where we've invested 15 million with local authorities all around the country in destination towns, plus the greenways that the Department of Transport are funding the development of in conjunction with local authorities, and all of the public realm work that local authorities are doing around the country, enhancing the outdoor offering that's been going on, whether it's been cycle lanes or outdoor seating and stuff. So when international tourists come back here, because of all that development that has continued apace while we've been effectively closed internationally, when they come back here, Ireland's going to be a far better place to come back to than it was even before the closing, because of all that development work. So we're going to be going in with a very strong product offering in that regard. Looking to the future, there's a couple of key areas. The outdoors is essential, and opening up and improving the access and the enjoyability of the outdoors. Making the most of our state-owned land and assets is essential, and improving access to those through our national parks, through our OPW sites, through the Quilcha sites, and all of the assets that the local authorities have. Another really important thing is the digitisation of the industry. There are parts of the Irish industry, like activity providers and like attractions, where they are behind best in class in the world in terms of their digital presence and online bookability. One of the things we've seen is over the period of COVID, the digital transformation globally has been massive. Some of the metrics the likes of Google look at will say that digitally the world has moved as much in the last 8 months as it moved in the previous 8 years. So it's a huge transformation has just happened, and that just means that we have to have our tourism businesses and tourism product with brilliant online presence. We've done a completely overhauled discoverireland.ie. I know Niall has done a fantastic job on Ireland.com for international visitors, but we need all of our industry to be in the same space, and we've got a big project that's going to be driving that. The other final thing I'll say is, in terms of sustainability. And that is also another big initiative that needs to happen in terms of, the tourism sector needs to play its part in Ireland meeting its climate change targets, and we need to, drive the further decarbonisation of the tourism industry and more sustainable transport solutions and things like that. So I think that's another big theme looking to those 5 years.
Thank you, Paul. I think I'll have to draw that particular debate to a close, if that's okay, and move on to Senator Michael Carey, please.
Thanks, Chair. You're very welcome. I think the first thing I'd like to say, I want to compliment both organisations. I think if we look at the figures, particularly with Tourism Ireland, prior to that, the huge numbers that come in, we were doing the job right in getting tourists into Ireland. And particularly, I'm involved in the County Tourism Committee in Longford myself, and I get regular emails from Paul with updates and that. And I have to say, and in particular since COVID, I think the Make a Break campaign has been excellent, and the promotion that has given all parts of Ireland. I would have been involved with Minister Moran in pushing to get the Hidden Heartlands brand for our Midland area, and I think it's proved more than successful. I think the numbers are ahead of what the projections were at the beginning, and I want to compliment the team, Paddy and the rest of the team that are working on that brand. I think they're doing an excellent job, and I just want to put that on the record. I think it's also given an opportunity for people in their own area to actually get to know their own area. And I know from my point of view at home in Longford, for people to get out and use the greenways, the walks we have along the river, the blueways, or forest walks, which are excellent, and which is really part of what the Hidden Heartlands brand is about, the slow, easy tourism. So I think there's been huge opportunities. Apologies if I cross over with questions, because I had to go out for votes there for a while. But just in relation to, you mentioned a number of schemes, CRSS and that, are there areas you've identified areas that haven't been serviced with various supports from government? And you mentioned a number of them there. And have you met with department officials, etc., to make sure that all areas of our tourism are being supported, to make sure that they're all there in 2021? And then also, do you feel do you have sufficient funds yourselves for a marketing campaign in 2022 ahead, that you have sufficient there to try and regain the visitors to Ireland?
Very briefly, yeah, I mean, we're. Thank you very much for the kind words on Hidden Heartlands. It is surpassing expectations. I think the businesses in the Hidden Heartlands did have a disproportionately good summer, and that Make a Break for campaign worked particularly well for that area, and along the Shannon corridor in particular did very, very well for the period of time they were allowed to be open. Delighted to say that as well. In next year we'll be finishing the destination town work in Longford Town, which will link up along that Canal Greenway, which I think will also be a further enhancement to that part of the world. In terms of, do we have enough money, etc. First and foremost, I would say, the priority needs to be on business survival for businesses. So, of course, we could always spend more money, but, the priority, I would say, would be, to get as much money to businesses to enable them to survive so they can be there to re-employ people and to take advantage when tourism can come back, which it will. Yes, we have been looking, we have regular meetings with all the sectors of industry, there are people in hidden heartlands, for example. Boat rental falls outside the area of CRSS. That's a real challenge to everyone operating along the Shannon Cruise in the Shannon Cruise business. Car rentals is another sector that falls outside CRSS. So there's a number of sectors, the inbound agents. There's a number of sectors that just because of the way it's set up aren't looked after yet, and other than the wage subsidy, and will need further support. Also, boat rental, for example, is excluded for historical reasons, I believe, from the reduction in VAT rate down to 9%. And it will be really important, first and foremost, that reduction is maintained to enable us to be competitive for recovery, but also, if at all possible, that it would be extended to include some sectors like boat rental and car rental that have been excluded to date.
Just a couple of other short questions, just in relation to the stay and save. I think that there needs to be, number one, I think it needs to be extended next year, and hopefully the businesses are open, but I think we need to do more promotion on the number of actual businesses that are registered with revenue, because I've done a bit of a check on it probably in October, and it was very low numbers in a lot of counties even registering to be available to be used. And just in relation to the retail export scheme, it's something that's cognizant at the minute, and I'm thinking of the English tourism trade are coming into Ireland, and it's just an issue about the threshold that has been put there by the Department of Finance of 75 with regard to the VAT refund. What are your views on that, or is that sufficient, or do you see that making an impact on the English tourism market in the years ahead?
Yeah, if we look at the percentage of spend, there was an original proposal, I think, for that threshold to be €175, and the drop of that to €75 has been massive, is massively important, because we look at the amount of people that spend. I mean, ideally, we'd love to see, there be no threshold there. We don't think there's any major issue. Other countries are getting more aggressive and offering that tax back system. So, in terms of, I'm not sure of the exact rationale of the introduction of it. 75 is a lot better than 175 for sure, but we'd prefer it to be zero, so that it can stimulate as much spend as possible in small craft shops and other retail shops when tourists come in.
Okay, thank you very much. There's a vote on there. So thank you very much, gentlemen. I have a few sort of questions and observations that I'd like you maybe just to comment on a little bit myself too. In terms of, I'm from the constituency of Cavan Monaghan, and I think we fall into the hidden heartlands, and maybe a part of the constituency comes into the ancient east as well. But I'm just wondering, like, obviously the success of the Wild Atlantic Way has been absolutely huge, and it just went to show the idea of marketing and packaging, what that can do for a whole entire region and that whole coastal area, what it opened it all up, and we never, I suppose, viewed it in that light until that Wild Atlantic Way was so famously put to it. But in terms of the rate of tourism, we'll say, of the Wild Atlantic Way, the hidden heartlands, the ancient east, have we any sort of statistics to show, I'm assuming that the Wild Atlantic Way is the most successful of those three packages or concepts, if you like. I'd just like if you could comment on that. Just to say that I suppose unlike the likes of Killarney and West Cork and all these beautiful tourist areas, I suppose Cavan Monaghan isn't somewhere that people automatically think about spending a week's holidays or 2 weeks' holidays, but we've got fantastic facilities, outdoor activities, and we've got the added, I suppose, challenge of being a border county and a border area, and with Brexit coming down the tracks, that presents a whole different set of challenges for us as well. But in terms of Fáilte Ireland's engagement with our local authority, I know Joanne Hayes there does wonderful work in trying to promote the county of Cavan. Could you talk to me a little bit about your engagement with the local authorities in terms of tourism and promotion? Belturbet is a town that there along the River Erne that I remember 10 or 15 years ago was a hive of activities with the boats coming in, tourists around the streets, and it's a very different landscape today for tourism. And again, just if you could talk a little bit about, I suppose, the emphasis that you have on areas and counties like that. I just wanted to get your views too on festivals that have been completely shut down. We didn't really talk too much about that today, but you know, the Galway Arts Festival, the European capital of culture. I'm thinking of festivals all around, particularly, I suppose, the coastal areas too. You know, the loss of that revenue, the loss of that tourism, and how we are going to come back from that. I would hope too. We will only be living with COVID for a certain length of time, and the introduction of a vaccine will bring all of that back to what it was. But it's a huge loss, I suppose, to the tourism industry as well. The festivals, the international arts festivals, the concerts, and you might just comment a little bit about that. And Paul, you mentioned something that I have to admit I'm not very familiar with, the Bear Breffni Way, and I just wondered if you could also brief us on that.
Okay. I'll try and take those in just quickly. I'll deal with the festivals issue if I can. Yeah, look, I mean, first of all, my heart goes out to everyone involved with Galway Capital of Culture. What a horrendous, what a fantastic opportunity there was, and a great programme of work that got completely decimated in terms of the impact by the year it fell in, being the same year as COVID. And we are, in terms of, we gave a lot of support to festivals through this year to help them to survive fundamentally. And I think when we're looking into the first half of 2020, it is festivals take a long time to plan and develop, and an awful lot of work goes into them. It's more important that festivals survive, so they're there for when they can really happen again. So we're going to be, whereas we don't envisage that, it is, that festivals are going to happen across the first half of next year in the same way as they normally would. We will be giving them some level of funding. It will be reduced, but to help them to survive so they're there for the future. We'll need to look at half to 2021 when closer to the time, to see how things are spreading, as whether the festivals can happen. But and Niall might talk to the international marketing of them. From Monaghan and Cavan point of view, yeah, Cavan is the west part of Cavan is in Ireland's ancient east, is in hidden heartlands, and the eastern part of Cavan is in Ireland's ancient east, as is Monaghan. We've got, and I think that the opportunity that brings, for that area, certainly that is very much on our radar. We'll have Monaghan Town. Unfortunately, it won't complete next year on Destination Towns. That's going to be a little bit later. That will complete hopefully in half one 2022. That we will have enhanced the offering of Monaghan Town as a tourism destination, and then that. We're working with that area in Cavan on as part of the Hidden Heartlands, and I think the opportunity there, and the opportunity we also of linking in with Fermanagh and that whole Cavan Lakes and Marble Arch, that whole area is something that we do think can be developed. The Bear Breffni Way, I think, will be a big addition when we can bring it to life. So that is effectively a continuous walk from Black Lion in Cavan down to the Bear Peninsula. Cavan will be at one end of that. So I think there's an opportunity for that to drive tourism growth as either a start point or a finish point on that walk.
Well, in terms of the two concept of the hidden heartlands and the ancient East, was there, do you think it's been helpful or unhelpful, the fact that the two concepts are kind of split in the county?
I think, look, we tried to, that was something we debated over long and hard as to whether we like to see a county fall into one brand area if we can, because it's simpler engaging with local stakeholders and local authorities and stuff like that. But there is, it's got to kind of make sense when we're presenting it to international visitors and how we show a map and share a map and stuff like that. So I don't think it is in any way harmed tourism development in Cavan. It's just made it a little bit more complicated, and is something that we in terms of we're happy to keep engaged with the local authority and local stakeholders and keep that under review. I think it is important that West Cavan is part of Hidden Heartlands. I think the offering there, the lakes, and that fits in better with the natural outdoors offering of Hidden Heartlands as opposed to the historical based offering of Ireland's ancient East. So I think that is important, and we are, we'll keep under review kind of that split, and we'll keep engaged with local authorities.
The same theme in terms of the success of the three particular concepts.
Yeah, look, the Wild Atlantic Way is obviously, but before the Wild Atlantic Way kind of even was done, that was an area that was more developed from a tourism point of view, with towns like Galway and Lahinch, the Cliffs of Moher, Kerry, of course, West Cork. So the Wild Atlantic Way has obviously accelerated that, and it has been, and it is the oldest brand. I mean, these brands are all incredibly new by international standards. They are babies, and the Wild Atlantic Way has been incredibly successful. Ireland's ancient East has grown, very well in terms of, and has really brought parts like Wexford and Kilkenny have done very well.
Heartlands? And
yes, but it was more developed to begin with, and it has been around longer. In terms of the start of the Hidden Heartlands, and Jenny might, because she was in charge of building Ireland's ancient East, the start in Hidden Heartlands has been a faster start than we had in Ireland's ancient East. We've had more industry engagement over the first year or so, and it is going incredibly well. Jenny, do you want to just speak to Ireland's ancient East for a moment from your history?
Yeah, from history, yeah. So just, I suppose, like Paul said, it's just to remember that those brands are really new and they're babies. And I suppose just the other thing is, and Niall will attest to this, but in terms of Wild Atlantic Way, it has a huge resonance with the domestic audience. The Ireland's ancient East had less resonance with the domestic audience, but actually had huge resonance with the international audience, because when the international audience looks at Ireland, it thinks about that green Ireland with those castles and that culture. So actually what Ireland's ancient East resonates is really resonates with the US market and with European, like France, etc. So actually Ireland's ancient East resonates better with the international markets than it does with the domestic. But having said that, that Keep Discovering campaign that we did last year really raised the profile of Ireland's ancient East domestically, and it is continuing to grow in the domestic market and has great potential, as does the Hidden Heartlands.
And just one final question. In terms of, I suppose, the historical tourism attraction for counties like Cavan was fishing, a very traditional, and I suppose now with COVID and outdoor activities, and that has been kind of lost over the last 10 or 15 years. Have you any plans to kind of invest in that type of tourism again for counties like Cavan?
Yes, I mean that is part of what we'll be looking at as we look to open up the outdoors, in terms of looking at the types of activities that will bring tourism in, but I think importantly that in terms of we've got to focus on the areas that can bring the best revenue in to areas, but that's certainly within that remit. Now, anything from an international point of view on brands or fishing?
No, I think, look, activities are going to be a focus for us into the future. I think you mentioned the festivals. That's really important for us, because when you think like St. Patrick's Festival, the Galway was just a tragedy this year, but the Galway International Arts Festival is big. Listowel Writers, Belfast Queen's Festival, they're all major parts of our promotional platform overseas. The other thing I just say about border counties as an all-island agency is that cross-border dialogue is really important, because it's important that we don't let the consumer think that all these experiences just stop at the border. There's an awful lot of great work that's been done over the years, and going back to the Shannon Earn project 20 or 30 years ago, that need to be continuously built on, and there's some good funding there under the Peace Initiative that we're continuing to talk to the colleagues of the tourist boards about, to make sure that the experiences just don't stop at the border type of thing.
Thank you very much, Jenny. I have two very eager TDs here to bring in more questions, maybe about their own constituency. Deputy Christopher O'Sullivan.
Thanks. Yeah, we had our own patiently. Fair play, guys. We're nearly up to the 2 hours now, and you've been fantastic so far in your answers. Let's start with a positive, Chairperson. Imagine a situation where both our constituencies are linked by a Camino-type walkway. I think that's absolutely phenomenal. The Bear Breffni way, there's the huge potential there, and I really think it has to be promoted and pushed, because it brings in everything good that Ireland has to offer. Tip of the Bear Peninsula up to Cavan. We'll meet halfway someday, Chair. Anyway, just getting down to a bit more detail on a few things we've touched on already, and just about Fáilte Ireland operations in particular. I think the adaptation grant. Do you have a figure on how much has been paid out of the adaptation grant so far, and how much remains to be paid out, and when the remainder is expected it could be paid out, Paul?
Let me see if I have the exact details on that. I don't think I suppose, first of all, I don't have a figure, because the closing date for a lot of businesses was extended until I think the middle of November. So we're still working through those applications. Importantly as well, we opened it then for the non-food serving pubs, and the closing date for those doesn't close until the 18th of December. So we will be taking applications right up until Christmas, and it will only be it'll only be in the new year when we have some sense of how much of that has been drawn down. But
get those figures as soon as possible would be great.
Yeah.
I just want to go back as well on a question that Deputy Alan Dillon asked you in relation to the exclusion of coffee shops, and I think you referred to the fact that petrol stations, for example, might have coffee shops. I think that really has to be revisited. I'm not suggesting for a second that coffee stations and petrol stations should be brought in within the remit of the adaptation scheme, but there are some really impressive cafes there within our cities and our towns, quite large, big demands for PPE gear, be it separation between tables, cleansing material, visors, masks, you name it. Some of them are quite surprised and disappointed that they're left out of the adaptation grant, just because they don't happen to have a liquor licence. I think I'd really ask you to possibly elaborate on that a bit more, and maybe revisit it, or if it could be revisited.
Yeah, I think first of all, I suppose it is important that we look at the scale of this. I mean, the adaptation grant was designed, because it was out of capital money, it had to be designed to cover capital costs. So PPE and things like that couldn't be covered because of government financing rules out of the adaptation. So it had to be an asset that was left in. So a Perspex screen could be covered, but a mask couldn't. A hand sanitizer unit could be covered, but the hand sanitizer liquid couldn't. So, in terms of that's just because it's capital funding that we had to allocate, and we were trying to get it out to as many businesses as we could, as quickly as we could, to help cover that. But the amount of money that for example, that a non-food serving pub get, I think, is €1,000. The restaurant would be €2,500. I think it's important that in terms of, that's not going to be the difference between survival and not survival for these businesses. In terms of, and the level of that funding, is probably dwarfed by what's available through CRSS, and is definitely dwarfed through the extended wage subsidy scheme, etc. So, in terms of there's that. I don't want people to think that, in terms of that, I've been excluded, so I'm going to miss out on 5 or 10 or 15,000 euros or anything like that, because that wasn't what the fund was there. And so it is a relatively small amount of money, and it can only be drawn down if the business has spent money on those type of assets. and that's just a requirement.
In the current climate, you know, 500, 1,000 euro could mean a lot to these businesses. And, you know, when they see their neighbour, like, you know, competing for the same lunchtime market, but being able to get a bit of a competitive advantage because they can avail of this grant, it does make a difference. So I'd really ask for it to be revisited. Last question in my 30 seconds. The 55 million contingency funding from the budget, any idea when or how that might be spent, and which stakeholders will be consulted in the allocation of that 55 million?
You know, in terms of in terms of consultation, we're listening to, you know, the challenges and industry input all the time. You know, we've a call that Niall sits on with us that we with all of the industry bodies represented on it every 2 weeks. We're listening to input on that. So, you know, in terms of our consultation with industry is extensive. When you get into designing the detail of funds and how funds work, you know, in terms of that just needs. That you can't do that in a big, huge committee. You know, you need a group of experts. There's a whole bunch of EU legislation that gets into account. So we will be doing that with our department based on the input that we've got from industry, based on, you know, the other government supports that are there, and we're working and we'll be working through that. You know, in terms of when you know when we will be, you know, it will be Q1 of next year when we'll be announcing the details. As I say, we've got 4 schemes underway at the moment. We have the adaptation scheme. We're administering the B&B restart scheme. We're administering the coach tourism scheme for 10 million, and now we have the inbound agent scheme for 10 million. So there is a bunch of, between those schemes, we've got 54 million that we're trying to get out to businesses, and we will work on the next 55 million. We have started working on designing the scheme based on all the inputs we're getting from industry, and we will, you know, we'll hope to have some, you know, further news on that in Q1. But that, I'm not going to say we're going to have the detail for the full 55 million in Q1, because we may end up doing that as a number of different schemes. We're looking at all the options at this stage, and so we may end up being faced, because we don't know what the challenges businesses are going to have later on in the year, you know, across next year as well. So we've got to...
Again, just say thank you so much for coming in. I appreciate it and look forward to working with both of you.
Thank you very much. Deputy Brendan Griffin.
Thanks, Chair. Conscious we're getting near the end here now, so I'll be very brief. I wanted to ask Paul about the development of 2 routes that I was very keen to have included in the programme for government. One is the Carlingford to Cove route, the coastal route, and developing an experience along that route. And the other is the development of the Wild Atlantic walking route from Mallinhead to Kinsale. And again, I live along that route. I'm very keen for years to see the linking up, for example, of the Dingleway and the Kerryway through Castlemaine Harbour. So I want to ask about an update on both of those experiences, and if there's a projected timeline in terms of moving those forward. And I wanted to also ask Niall then as well in relation to international travel in the aviation sector in particular. I note that you envisage our best markets are the closer to home markets right now. And I was always struck from my time in the department on the huge increase in lift between North America and Ireland between 2011 and 2018-19. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was something like going from 7 routes, I think in 2011, to 24, 25, I think by the peak in 2018, 2019. What's your outlook in terms of what type of capacity we're going to have in terms of seats from 2022 onwards? How long will it take us to get back to the level of lift that we had at the peak? And again, I'm conscious you don't have a crystal ball. If you did, I'd be asking you for tonight's lot of numbers. I think it's 12 million tonight, I think, or something like that. But, you know, what's your best judgment on it, I suppose, is what I'm asking. Thanks.
That's a hard question right now. I mean, the aviation side has been decimated, all those routes, and you're quite right. I mean, the North American experience was spectacular for the last 7 or 8 years. And, you know, traditional gateways like New York, Boston, Chicago, I mean, are there and they'll come back probably on a smaller scale in the initial sense. But, I mean, what we're looking out for is where the real spectacular growth had come from in the last 6, 7 years was the likes of San Francisco, LA, Seattle, Dallas with American Airlines, you know, the likes of Philadelphia and Charlotte. And I've no crystal ball right now. We have talked to all the carriers and they're living day by day. I mean, back in March, Delta Airlines are burning over a cash burn of $100 million a day. That's down to $18 million a day now. So these are big numbers that are impacting on the connectivity. The American Airlines have been granted a bailout of $50 billion by the US government to keep things going. Lufthansa $9 billion, Air France KLM as well. But I mean, we are fortunate to have 2 great carriers in Ryanair and Aer Lingus who serve us really well. And I think we have to do everything we can to work with those airlines to help restore connectivity, particularly into our regional airports. Because I mean, Dublin is in a very difficult shape now, but a lot of the airlines will return to Dublin. But Knock is closed at the moment. I mean, Shannon has no commercial flights right now. Cork is an average of 2 per day. So it's probably one of the biggest crises we'll have in the restoration of people coming here. I mean, people are putting out some projections that maybe, you know, we see it restored within 3 years. But there are a lot of factors that will underpin that. Ryanair made that comment recently. We'd love to think that because that would be the ultimate driver of how fast recovery comes. But a lot of those airlines and routes were hard won. There's sometimes marginal calls as to will I fly from Dallas to Dublin or Dallas to Manchester, and you know we go in and we work very hard to sell the destination, and we're going to have to do that again.
Thank you very much. And we have one final question from Sarah.
I'll be very brief. You know, we're continuing to work on research and scoping around the Wild Atlantic Way coastal walking route, and you know, in terms of that was another one of these, you know, huge ideas when we research different product ideas that could drive a lot of incremental business. So we're continuing to do the scoping work, etc. on that. We were delighted to see the Carlingford to Cove route in the programme for government, and you know, in terms of we're beginning to kind of scope out thinking on what that might look like. And you know, but that's in very early stages. I mean, the one thing I can say is that, you know, obviously, as Niall says, you know, the visitor experience doesn't stop at the border. And I did have one conversation with my colleague John McGuillan in Tourism Northern Ireland about, you know, what might happen if we have that route and how that might go up and around places like Giant's Causeway, etc. So, you know, in terms of, I think it's an excellent initiative, and we'll be working, but we're just in very early stages of looking at, you know, in terms of what kind of shape that might take, but trying to be as, you know, as creative as possible and look at different alternatives there, and you know, I suppose important as well as to think sustainability in that. And
if I could just encourage as early as possible engagement with the communities living along the way. I remember doing a reconnaissance in January 2018 from driving south from Dublin down to Wexford and to Waterford along that part of the coastline. I mean, I think there's huge potential. I think exactly as you're saying, sustainability, I think is the buzzword that we need to focus on. But I think it can be done and can become a very, very successful product, and again can mirror the success of the Wild Atlantic Way. And again, the Wild Atlantic Way is only seen the beginning of its success, I think, by again further developing that into a continuous walking route. I think it can be something for many generations to come. It can be a huge money spinner for local communities along the way. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And finally, Senator Corry.
Thank you. No, just a quick, more of an observation or an opinion, I suppose. I feel like we promote a lot in Ireland, and just in Longford alone recently, you've invested in the Knights and Conquest project, which I was involved in at the beginning, and Mariah Edgeworth, and we're telling stories of different parts in our history. But I feel that we don't actually tell the story of our own independence, and it's something that fears graw for, to be honest myself, that whole period, and we're in the decade of commemorations. but we don't actually, I don't believe there's any site that tells that story. Like, we have the GPO in Dublin and we have, say, Kilmainham Jail that are specific, but I don't think we have anywhere that tells the whole story of that we can tell or teach our kids about. And it's something now they're more aware of. They weren't for years, and to be honest, that was never nearly taught in history in our schools up until recently. And I think it's extremely important. As I said before, I'm from Longford, very strong links to that whole period in our history, Cork, Tipperary. I just feel, just your reviews on it, I honestly believe it's a project that could be developed somewhere. Naturally enough, I'd be prioritising my own area, I think, because of them very, very strong links. But I do think we need somewhere that people can go, come to Ireland, can go and get the whole story told. You know, like we're telling other stories in other ventures and projects around the country.
Yeah, I mean, you know, as I said, there are a number of places where, you know, we tell that story. I think GPO, Witness History, as you say, Kilmainham Jail are two that stand out very, very near here. But you know, there's the Michael Collins Centre down in Clonakilty, you know, and various other places around the country where we do kind of tell that story. I think it's important, I suppose, that, you know, in terms of when we, obviously we need to tell stories sensitively, you know, in terms of, but it's also important when we're looking at that story, when we're looking at the development of destinations, that, you know, in terms of we're looking at developing destinations using stories, but stories that are distinctive and different to an area. What we do sometimes find is that, you know, I know that every parish and every county in Ireland has great history and has got great stories from various parts of history, etc. And, you know, but what we've got to see is, okay, which of those are different and unique to that area and also compelling and of interest to visitors, you know, in terms of, because because if we invest in ones that don't meet all those criteria, we will be putting, you know, taxpayers' money into things that won't necessarily give a return to the local community and local economy. So we've got to look at and make sure that they are, if you like, of interest to visitors and also distinctive, that it's not of interest to visitors but the exact same thing as something else has just down the road from them. So, you know, in terms of, I think that's kind of our point from a developmental point of view. I don't know if, I'm sure it's a difficult thing to market, Niall.
Well, I'm an all-island body, so there's lots of different dimensions to the independent story. But what I would say from our own experience is that one of the best ways of bringing stories to life on the ground are actually walking guides. And I mean, there is a big interest in local history, and everyone's interpretation of independence across the 32 counties in this island is very different, I can assure you. But it is something that, like, people need to think about at community level, as opposed to always the National Tourist Board doing it. But I mean, if you go to the likes of West Belfast, the walking tours there tell a very interesting story of modern history, which is very sensitive and raw at the moment, so to speak, but it brings a whole chapter of history to life. And I think there's an awful lot of capacity around other towns and villages in Ireland to do that. And from an international perspective, that's sometimes the feedback that you get the best of on, as opposed to, you know, an interpreted panel or whatever. I mean, the museums are great. I mean, what's been brought to life through the 1916 journey has been really good, and that's got great resonance, and even things like Epic telling the story of the diaspora. There's some really good product that's come on the scene, but don't discount the local walking guide to bring the story of the local place to life, and sometimes they're the best people to do it.
Thank you very much. Paul, in a word, the Bear Breffni project, where is that at and what's the time frame for its completion?
That's in master plan development mode at the moment, and I think, you know, in terms of there will be more, we'll have an update on that at some stage during next year. In terms of time frame for its completion, I don't, until we kind of complete, you know, get the full scope of what's required from a developmental point of view. I couldn't give that, you know, at the moment, because I know that these things will complete over phases. So there's already, you know, in terms of, there are sections of it that need to be upgraded. There are sections of it that are on road that we need to take off road to improve the visitor experience, etc. So, but the walk is already there, and you can go do it today, kind of thing. But it is not uniformly up to a standard that we would say is good enough for us to with confidence, ask Niall and his team to be, promoting it out there, because the international visitor expectation would be higher. So we need to get it up. We need to get it up to the standard, and that's what the master plan is about. So look, I think we'll have more. We'll have more on that, and I'll find out a bit more detail on the timetable and send that on to you.
Would you?
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
probably Deputy O'Sullivan would too.
Yeah.
Since it was really. I'd like to thank our guests for being with us here today.